I'm Shane.
And I'm Alex.
And this is the RPM Podcast.
Here we are with launch number 3 of 10. It's Alfa Romeo. The Sauber-run team is here with their competitor for the 2021 season. And as with our other 2 videos, we're going to discuss the launch program itself and the car and a little bit about the expectations coming into the season. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it.
So first things first, the launch program. Initially, I found it a bit strange, but over time, I found it to be a little bit more comforting. And I'll go into that as we go through the podcast. But it started off with 2 chaps. Oh, sorry, a chap and a lady. I can't remember their names. Do forgive me. Talking about almost the heritage of Alfa Romeo and how great Poland is and their sponsors, and it was all very dramatic. It felt like a little bit like Eurovision. It was all very like, This is the brand new Alfa Romeo, which is absolutely fine. Obviously, it's a show. There wasn't anyone in the crowd, and obviously, we've already mentioned before how hard it is to present to a camera potentially, and these aren't seasoned veterans. But it started off with a wonderful piano piece and some dancing, which lasted about 3.5 minutes to introduce the 2 managers, or the team principal and the design director for Alfa Romeo. I can't remember their titles, so I apologise again. But
it was Frederick Vasseur, the team principal, and their technical director, who is I think I wrote it down somewhere, Jan Monchot.
That's the one. I'm glad you've wrote that down and I haven't. But yeah, that was it was about 3 or 4 minutes of dancing. And how did you feel about that? We've obviously talked about strange car launches so far, and dancing actually isn't too strange on the grand scheme of things when it comes to car launching. We've seen it in the past before with Ferrari, and I'm sure we'll see it in the future again. But what did you make of it?
It was a lot more Ferrari-esque, wasn't it? It was quite formal and traditional, and they were coming from the National Theatre in Warsaw in Poland. And yeah, I think you described it as Eurovision. It was definitely reminded me of that too. The only difference with Eurovision, of course, is that this is something that the UK might actually be quite good at. But yeah, we had the usual sort of a little bit of waffling about the history and all this sort of stuff. And then the dancing was very nice. They were dressed in the colours of the team, and then they had a little fusion thing going on. And then I thought one thing that was quite impressive was they had 2 piano players, but they were playing the same thing, but it was also quite, like, there wasn't a very strong pulse. So they had little earpieces. So I think maybe they had like a click or a backing of some kind in their ears so that they were synced up. But you could tell that there was a theme of the 2 colours coming together and having this little fusion. So that was quite nice. It was quite traditional and something a bit different. It was very different to the other 2 launches, certainly.
It's strange how we've had, well, it's not strange at all. We've had 3 car launches now, and they've all gone about it their different ways. And I'm sure that would be the same theme throughout the rest of the next 2 weeks, where we have the remaining, I'm going to say 7 car launches, but technically we've got 8 launches, because we've got Ferrari's team launch, personnel launch, and then the car itself a week or 2 later. So I'm sure it will get weird and wonderful. So we had the 2 directors come up and talk about Alfa Romeo and how we've got this brilliant fusion. I really love that word, how they're bringing everything together, and they're really hopeful for this season. And then we had some more dancing and more piano pieces to take a look into. Well, then they launched is it the C34?
The 41.
You're going to correct me now.
The C41.
Say again? C41. So they launched the C41.
Because the last year's car was the C39. But the
it's gone
2021
backwards.
car will be the C41, because the C40 was the car that was designed originally for the first 2021 regulation changes, when they were originally going to change it. So they'd already started that car as the C40. So actually, we'll go from the C39 last year to the C41 this year to the C40 next year, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting way of naming
it's
your
the
cars.
order they've developed them.
Yeah, I mean, fair play to them. I mean, that kind of makes sense, and it's a little bit more interesting than just naming it in a procession like maybe Mercedes do and McLaren have done for the last couple of years.
Yeah, they haven't just added a letter to the end of their name. They've gone for something completely different. So
the car was introduced on a podium, wasn't it?
Yeah, they kind of brought it up from the stage. It kind of came up from beneath, which was kind of neat, I suppose. There was also interesting when they were talking to the technical director, there was like all this kind of background noise going on, and it sounded like somebody dropped something. Did you hear that? There's lots
Yes.
of somebody
Yeah.
dropped something, and then there was lots of muttering and talking, and yeah, it was a slightly awkward live event. It wasn't fully polished, but I found that strangely charming. They're
Yeah,
human beings after all.
it just goes to show that these things aren't, they're not perfected, and like you said, it is that everyone is human. So the car came up from the ground in a big misty atmosphere with the 3 drivers, and I couldn't have thought of such a more dramatic way to bring the car to attention. But then you've got Kimi Räikkönen, who just doesn't have any facial expressions whatsoever, and it just, I mean, I don't want to say it looked awkward because we've already had that conversation with McLaren, but it was a bit awkward. This is Kimi Räikkönen. He's a stone cold killer. He is the Iceman, and yet he's coming out from the floor of this amazing like venue with mist and a little bit of smoke, and he's just got this plain expression on his face. It made me chuckle how he must be feeling. Maybe he's completely comfortable with these kind of things, but
He's probably
deep down,
used to
I'm
it
like,
by now, isn't he? He's done it
True.
enough times.
It reminded me of the venue of the podium in Mexico. When there was like smoke and the podium turned around and there was a DJ and everyone else was like going wild and Kemi was there like chugging the champagne.
Yeah.
Like it kind of I had a bit of a throwback to that because that's what it kind of felt like. It was just like
in his baggy overalls.
Exactly. Yes, it wasn't exactly what I was expecting for Kimi Räikkönen, but he probably just does what he's told. I'm sure of it.
And as expected as well, because we're in Poland. Orlen, obviously their title sponsors, the Polish oil company. It's interesting that Kubica gets as much profile as the other 2 race seat drivers. I can't imagine any other team will do that. I wouldn't have thought so anyway. So they've obviously leaned on this Polish connection. Poland can into Formula One as Kubica gets to stand up there as well, and he's obviously got a very strong following in his home country. So it's interesting to see him up there as well. I can't imagine any other team will put their reserve driver up there as well with their race drivers.
I completely agree, and it almost looked a bit like a sore thumb. Like there was 3 drivers there, and
that's not a very nice thing to say about Kubica.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Robert, but it was just like you said. It's very unusual for 3 drivers to be presented. To present their new car. It's always the 2 drivers and like the team principals. It was just 3's a crowd. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from the reserve driver and the 3rd driver. Very important role, as they discussed on the launch. How many hours he'll be putting into it, and hopefully he's gonna get to drive the car a couple of times this season. Which is all all really good stuff. But yeah, for the launch event, they were definitely leaning on, like you said, the Polish connection, the Poland sponsor. That's what it was there for. At the end of the day, it was nothing else.
Should we talk a little bit about the technicals of the car then? That was finally revealed to us, and we can make some comparisons between last year's car. I suppose the main thing to point out, of course, is much like a lot of the teams, you've got a thinner nose, which is what we've seen from a lot of people either already or coming into this season. It's still wider than some teams have chosen to go, though, and they have already had a bit of a wider nose. And have maintained their wider nose longer than some of the other teams, and it is still a little bit wider than we might have expected. It has a sort of caped nose tip as well, which is interesting. But a lot of it, I think they've used both of their development tokens on the front wing, changes to some little notches coming out of the front wing itself, and it has a more of a slant downwards, whereas last year's car with the wider nose had almost like a curvature to his slant, it looked like. So a lot of changes to the nose and to the front wing in itself. What stuck out to you immediately?
It was the amount of development they were keen to share with the public. They were very strong that they've continued to develop this car throughout the year, throughout last year, throughout the winter, and they've heavily invested into the front wing, like you said, and the front and the nose, and just going up. So the whole front of the car feels like it's almost had a brand new kind of spec. That's how heavily invested they are. And I would say from their reaction and from what they were talking about, they're very confident about the changes they've made.
Yeah, it looks like they've really gone all in on what works for the concept of their car. You can see lots of different veins on the side of the front wing, and and all the changes. Supposedly some suspension changes as well. I couldn't really see
Yep,
that on
yep.
the images, but maybe it's something to do with the internals. Um, I think just to touch a little bit on where Sauber slash Alfa Romeo are coming into this season, it's it's not been an amazing past few seasons for the team. They've probably been a little bit disappointed with things, but they had a car last year that was rather starved for power, as we've mentioned before, because of the Ferrari engine. And apart from a few strong finishes where they were able to take advantage of circumstances to score some points, Giovinazzi's ninth place at the opening race was as good as it got. And double points at Imola. Raikkonen had his very exciting start in Portugal. They're the only
Yep.
real major highlights that come to mind. But it wasn't all bad news because they were occasionally able to actually beat Ferrari on a couple of
Yep.
occasions. They were able to beat their suppliers. And I think the poor engine performance probably disguised what wasn't too bad of a car overall. I remember when they had Leclerc in the seat, they were able to fight at the front of the midfield on a couple of occasions. So I think they probably have good reason to be comfortable with this car, and I hope that they do find themselves a little bit further up the grid.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more that the car has potential, and I think hopefully with these updates, it will find itself, especially with Kimi driving his experience up the top end of the midfield pack, like challenging for decent points every week. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but I heard someone on the stream mention that a win for them would be achieving a podium. They want to achieve a podium this year,
That
and
is bold.
that is very bold, and I'm 100% sure. I don't know why I said that, but I'm 100% sure that someone said that on the stream. One of the drivers. It wasn't Kimi. It was one of the other two. Um, and that's a huge statement to make. That's a massive benchmark to set yourself. So clearly they've heavily invested. It just reconfirms what we've said. They've heavily invested into the front end of their car, suspension, front wing, nose cone, and they believe that all these updates will help push their car forward. But to get a podium, that would be that would be incredible. I think I'm just like, McLaren were very reserved about what they've said and what their targets are. They're in a little bit more of a, sticky situation where they've almost outperformed themselves in 2020 and they've got to almost match themselves in 2021. But Alfa Romeo could just say, we want to move forward. But no, they've set their sights on a podium, which is it's fair game. This is Formula One. Anything can happen. Maybe they're hoping for an interesting sprint race to mix up things. You never know. But like you said, very, very confident moving forward.
Yeah, they probably have a bit of justification in that confidence as well, coming from the increased number of sponsors on their car as well, which I
Yeah.
noticed. And much like McLaren, they're sporting some extra names across the car. And that's good because I think the team has had some struggles with funding during the period in which they were taken over by, I think it was Longbow Finance in 2016, when they ran their sort of, I think this must have been about the time they were running their bluer, their sort of blue Sauber
Yeah.
livery.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, they were taken over around that kind of period and then obviously partnered with Alfa Romeo. So I think they're still recovering a little bit from that. So these extra sponsors on the car combined with their confidence obviously shows that there is a little bit of wind in their sails. So maybe aiming for a podium is bold, but not entirely unreasonable. We've seen some upsets in the last season, so who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. With a calendar which is, as much as it's set in stone, we're still very much in the middle of a pandemic, and 23 races would be an incredible achievement at the end of the year for the 2021 season. I'm sure there'll be some changes as we go through and, situations increase or decrease throughout the world. But going back to those sponsors and going into the future, we've got obviously this cost cap coming in. So we're severely limiting some teams and how much they can spend, but also giving other teams a potential at working at that top of that cost cap. And we know that the teams like Williams are being able to achieve that, and AlphaTauri have mentioned that they're going to be able to achieve that cost cap. And hopefully with these sponsors on the Alfa Romeo, they'll be able to work at the near end, the top 90% of the potential amount of money they could spend on a year. And that's exciting. That's really exciting going forward because there will no longer be this massive, financial change. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but just that financial stretch some teams can really push to. They can put so much money into the sport, and you can see that they're doing very well. But bringing these teams together, limiting those top teams, and bringing these lower teams into the range is going to be so exciting. And for teams like Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, and Williams. I'm really excited to see what they can do with working at the maximum budget they can potentially do. It's going to be great.
The ideal is that a lot of these teams can work at or near the top of the cost cap, so that they can all innovate within that area, because obviously they all have to spend a lot of money within the sport in order to achieve that level of technical expertise. But yeah, if they can all work within that range, then it can hopefully produce some very close racing between all of the teams. So
It's going to be
that's the goal.
exciting.
So let's move on to the livery then.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about this this subtly different livery? A bit of an inversion of colours in a few places.
I'm a huge fan, if I'm being honest, and I'll just take it back ever so slightly. So I mentioned at the start of the stream, you had this very flamboyant fusion of smoke, different colours, introducing the team principles, the drivers, and the vehicle itself. But then it cut to a highlights reel, or like a showcase of the Alfa Romeo, and it got a bit technico. It got a bit techno. It was in like a dark garage with a lorry in the background. It was very modern. It was like almost a complete switch to what I was expecting for like a highlights reel for the vehicle. But I really enjoyed that, and I really liked that. And I think the car looks fantastic. Very subtle changes. Like you've got the on the edge of the wing, on the end plates, it was predominantly white with a red sponsor, and now it's predominantly red with a white sponsor. For a season which is looking to be maybe having some dark cars on the grid, we don't know what obviously Alpine are going to produce, but we've got a couple of like darker cars on the grid. I think the white and red, I think it's going to look really nice. And from the pictures we've got and the videos we've seen, I think they've done a fantastic job. They've subtly changed it, but I think it's for the better, and I really like how it looks.
Yeah, a lot more white and what appears to be a slightly darker maroon colour compared to last year. Yeah, a bit of an inversion on the engine cover, where what was white is now the dark red, and vice versa. Speaking of the engine cover, it also sports their signature green quadrifolio, which is a great addition. I really like that being on there as well. Yeah, I feel the same way as you. I really, really like this livery. I've really liked all of the Sauber liveries since they've been with Alfa Romeo. I only wish it had the coloured stripes down the nose that they had like last year. Now they just have the darker single strip instead, which is a bit more subtle. But I really like those coloured strips that they had before. So if they added those, it would be even better. But overall, it's just absolutely lovely. And I've driven this car on the F1 game a few times just because I really like the look of it, and I like seeing it go around the track. So, like you, I'm a very big fan of the look of this car, and they've done a great job. Hopefully, it's as fast as it looks.
Absolutely. Interestingly, this year's car is white on the top and red on the bottom, which is very reminiscent of the Polish flag, which is obviously their reserve driver and a massive sponsor of that vehicle. Whereas last year and the year before, it was red on the top or maroon on the top and white parts on the bottom. Maybe a strategic switch, maybe a sponsoring inclined switch. I don't know, but I saw someone mention it on Twitter, so that's not me finding out this. But looking at it retrospectively, yes, it's very white on top and very red on the side. So maybe to look like the Polish flag. Who knows? But that's just an observation someone made.
Yeah, maybe they're hoping that Raikkonen, who very well may be in his last season in Formula One, he's going to be 42 this year, I think.
It's a cracking effort.
Yeah, he may be getting replaced by Kubica maybe in the future. Maybe that's what they want to do.
Well, who knows? But yeah, it's just a little observation there. Right, guys, so there we have it, the third launch of the 2021 season. What did you think of the livery? Let us know in the comments below if you're listening on YouTube. And if you're if you're listening on a podcast app, then you can get in touch with us on Twitter at RacePerMinute.com. Wherever you're listening, you can subscribe to us or follow us or subscribe to the app. It really helps, and give us a like rating, like Alex says and I say every single week. Getting that thumbs up just goes to show that you like what we're doing, and it's not just bots listening to our podcast. It's actual real human interaction if you give us a thumbs up. Like I mentioned, you can follow us at RacePerMinute on Twitter, but you can also get in contact with us at info@raceperminute.com, and you can send us your thoughts, your opinions, whatever, and we'll read them out in future podcasts. And if you really like what we do, you can support us for as little as £1 a month on Patreon, which is patreon.com facebook.com/raceperminute. That's all from me. Alex, any final thoughts?
Just that we'll see you again very soon, as at the time of recording, tomorrow we got Red Bull to look forward to.
That'll be good.
See you then.
Bye.